the School of Fiction.
Hi, welcome to the School of Fiction. I'm Matt Posner, and I have with me today Jennifer Jaxxon-Louis, very experienced novelist, and she's going to tell us about a couple of different plotting methods that I'm really excited to present to you. They're very different from the way that I've worked with things, and looking forward to learning a lot from her. So, Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself, and we're going to take a look at your website.
Okay, well, I have been writing for quite a while, but I'm now just starting to publish. And so I mainly write young adult. I was a math professor for most of my career and also a computer programmer. And so I kind of use my books and I write about a lot of STEM topics because I really want to urge teens. And I love working with teens and writing for teens and young adults, but I really want to kind of give them information that I did not have when I was very interested in STEM areas and, kind of work it into some interesting thoughts. So I'm not like pounding them over the head with it, but just to give them some valuable information. And so I just love writing. I have a lot of interest, but writing is my number one goal. And so I'm publishing my first book this week, actually. I'm very excited. It's a young adult sci-fi thriller called One in Vermilion May Live. And so I'm preparing for that, and there's a lot to do and a lot to know.
And this looks really action-packed when we look at the summary of it.
Oh yeah, I really tried. It's based kind of on a true story and about a bus tour I took to Michigan Tech, which was very influential. And I went to Michigan Tech, and it's about a group of students who are basically kidnapped and they're shot up with nanobots. It's about 5 years in the future, and nanotechnology and artificial intelligence are huge, and they're forced to play this very deadly game all over the Midwest. And the most exciting thing is I worked in like a lot of real locations all over the Midwest that I'm really familiar with, just to have the most conflict and most exciting, situations and experiences. So it was a lot of fun to write. And then I have this other interweaving storyline of her twin sister, and she is a very opposite of this motorcycle gang that she has to infiltrate. And so, she needs to infiltrate this gang to like save her sister. So it's two plots kind of in one. And so I call it a twisted sister kind of book. You can kind of see that on the bottom.
I was
And
about to
so,
ask you about that. The last author that I interviewed has a character who rides a motorcycle too. So,
oh, that's funny. Yeah,
yeah.
well, I was really influenced by Sons of Anarchy, and I was also really active in the biker community in Fort Lauderdale, and I knew I needed a criminal element for my plot, and so I just thought it was like absolutely perfect.
Well,
And
do you have a
but
bike now?
also,
Can
what's
you send
that?
me a picture of your bike? Because I had a picture of Keith Weber's bike in the last video I did.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
have if
No,
you
I
have a
don't
bike
ride
now,
any.
send me a picture.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
put it in.
But also, the main character, she's a hip hop dancer and she's perfected her head spin. So her nickname is Twista Sister, also. So it's kind
Okay.
of a double meaning in there. But every book in this series is going to be a twisted tale of two sisters' stories. So not necessarily these two sisters, but so that's just kind of the theme that's going to run through the series.
I see that the next book is what, Two in Vermilion May Live, I think.
Two in Vermilion May die.
May Die. Oh,
And
okay. All right.
then, right, and then the third will be Three in Vermilion May Lie. And then after that, I am not sure because I haven't thought that far ahead. So, yeah, and then this one is another book that I've been working on these short stories for years, and I wrote a novel around them. So I want to publish that soon as well. It's called What Happened in the Janitor's Closet. So that's unrelated to the series.
Hmm. Okay, excellent. So, the website will be in the description of the video, along with other links that Jennifer has provided to me. So, Jennifer, let's get into your plotting method. I'm going to open up this presentation that you've made for us.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Okay,
Right?
yep. So I definitely know about myself. I've been writing for a long time. I've tried so many different things, and I know I struggle the most with plot because I think too large and I think of these really crazy, complicated plots. And I've tried to write so many novels, and I would just like write myself into a corner or just, you know, I'm like, I don't even know what my book is about anymore. And then I discovered this wonderful author and teacher of writing named Joyce Sweeney, and she developed the plot clock. Yep. So if we could go back to the first one. Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So my biggest challenge of plotting, I see here we are.
Yeah.
And right. So Joyce Sweeney, she is an author, but she's an agent. She's a playwright. And I took several classes and workshops with her. And I don't know if she invented this, but she published with several others this book called The Plot Clock. And so I learned her method, which is a little bit different than a 3-act structure. It kind of divides it into 4, which I've tried both. I've tried so many methods, but for whatever reason, this one is so easy to follow. And I don't know, it works the best for me. But along with that, the Snowflake method I want to talk about, I use them together. And this is something I just discovered on my own online by another author, Randy Ingermanson. And so I'll explain like how I use them together. And it really, really helps me to kind of stay on track when my ideas just kind of go all over the place. Right. And then, right. So, you know, I said like I want to harness my ideas and keep the plot really engaging, but also have it make sense. And the other thing is that it helps me to like work backwards and put key elements. Like if I'm writing a mystery or I want a lot of surprise, it helps me put things at the right places. So I am, you know, putting in red herrings and things to mislead the reader and all that. So, okay, so we can go on to the next place. I didn't know if we skipped a couple. Anyway, so right, so some things I always keep in mind when I'm plotting is I always need to raise the stakes and I want conflict everywhere. And then the other thing I've learned is I need to always make my readers care about my characters from the very first page, from the first paragraph. They need to know who my character is and care about them. And then something I read a long time ago, I always keep in my mind too. They say you want to put your protagonist in a tree and throw things at them, create as many obstacles as you can, because conflict really drives a story.
So put the
And
character in the tree is that, I guess that's an analogy for having the character be in a tough situation.
exactly. It's like, what can you do to make a difficult situation for that character, whoever it is? And then also, my plot sometimes can be way too complicated. But then other times it's too simple so where you don't even have enough of a story. So I really, focus on, not having it be too crazy and complicated that no one can follow it and lose interest, but it has to have something to it, especially if you're trying to write a mystery, which to me is something I'm always striving to do, to have it not be obvious. And then another thing I really learned is to keep the minimum number of characters, and they should be really, really distinctive to tell my story. So you don't want to have too many characters, and you don't want to like over describe details, not just of characters, but of scenes and situations. That I tend to sometimes overdo it, to have it be more natural. And then the other thing I always
Let me just jump there. I want to take a moment.
Sure.
I want to plug one of my other videos. I have a video about the basics of characterization. So when we talk about distinctive characters, you want to think about the round and the flat characters. So flat characters will have one point that makes them stand out, and round characters will have multiple ones. So characters that are going to be distinctive will be round and flat. Encourage everybody to take a look at that video also. But first, let's hear more from Jennifer.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, right? Because I mean, with some characters, we don't need to know everything about them, but everybody should have a purpose or they do not belong in the story. And sometimes when I feel I have too many characters, especially in a scene, I think of how can I combine characters to get rid of some of them, because I don't want it to be too confusing to where I lose my readers and they put the book down. And then also very important is the names of characters should not be hard to pronounce, and they should not all start with the same letter because readers get confused. So I really try to think of different characters' names that make them really stand out, and to give each character something very distinctive, like you said, about them that I can remember. This is the one who whatever. But the other thing, the main thing I always keep in mind is on every page, somebody should want something. And so, even if it's just a glass of water, somebody should be in need of something and have a goal that is difficult to get. So those are just some things I keep in mind, and we can go on. Okay, so one thing, I get an initial idea of something and I think it through a little bit, and then I kind of come back to it. Does it even excite me the next day? Do I care about it? Is it something that keeps my imagination? And then I try to explain it to other people and get their reaction. And I want to think of something original. And then sometimes people say, that's just like some show I watch and it's something I don't even know about. So I want to make sure it's something truly original. And then, also, do my ideas about it flow easily? Is there enough of a story here? Or is it just the beginning of an idea and it doesn't really have anywhere to go? And so I start just initially with brainstorming. I drive a lot for my job and I'm always just, recording in my phone, different ideas on characters, plots, situations. Usually I start with an inciting incident. Yes.
I was going to say because well, I drive a lot too, so I have a playlist. And I listen to the music and I think about scenes, and the songs correspond to scenes or characters. They're
Oh,
very
that's
similar.
interesting. Everybody has different things that inspire them. And I also just think really like, well, when I'm driving for some reason. And yeah, so I like to just kind of brainstorm and as thoughts come, I, say them into my phone. And then I just start to think about what is my main plot going to be and what are some possible subplots. So I just start writing these ideas down and then I start putting them into order. And then we can go on, please. So now here's the plot clock, and this is what I start with. This was Joyce Sweeney, that author that I took classes. And so it's a 4-act structure, which I love because I'm a mathematician. So it's 4 quadrants, but this one goes clockwise, hence the plot clock. It is so in the first act, you need to think about who is your protagonist and what is their normal world? What is it like? Who are they? And you got to start thinking about that. And then something happens, and it can be anywhere in this first quarter of your story that is the inciting incident that shakes up the world of your protagonist. And then again, it should happen in the first quarter. And so, whatever happens, the protagonist grapples with whatever happens to them, and they finally at the end of that act, and I really struggle with this, they have to commit to some new action. And Joyce had always said, are they going to go join the circus? What are they going to do to commit themselves to now in act 2 and 3? They are in a new special world. And so this really helps me to think about like, what are the goals of the story? What am I as an author even trying to say with the whole story? And what are my characters' goals? And then at this point, I also think of what are some possible themes that I want to emphasize. And so the first act to me is really like the thing, and I do the best with the first act. It's after that it gets really challenging. But, how do I establish who this character is? And most importantly, how do I make people care about my characters and story? It takes a page or two and they're going to put your book down unless something piques their interest. Okay, and we can move on, please. And jump in anytime. I'm just kind of going through this, but if you have any questions or anything, Matt, please do.
Oh, of course. So I'm because I'm planning to go through all of the plotting methods that
Yeah.
because I continue to make videos, and when we first started talking, I was happy because I wanted to cover the Snowflake method, and you're doing it, which I
Yeah.
really like. It's kind of different from how I write, so learning about new stuff is exciting to me. But this one does remind me. It's giving me the kind of flashbacks to a couple of things, such as the hero's journey. And it's also giving me flashbacks to the 4-act structure and 3-act structure, and I'm feeling this. I'm getting little memories of other terms, like for example, call to adventure and stuff like that. So it's interesting that all the different plotting methods have sort of some common core to them. which I guess
Yeah.
we'll see more of it when we get to the next thing you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I've tried some other ones too. There's so many, there's so much information out there. It's hard to know, but you just got to go with what works to you. Okay, so after I, think of my first act, which for some reason always comes the easiest, then instead of moving forward in my story, I go back to the drawing board and I start to snowflake, I call it. And so this is how Randy Ingermanson says to start. He says, start with what is your book going to be about in 15 words or less. And this really helps me, to like focus everything down and really identify what is the most important thing of my story and why would anyone be interested. This is your hook, your elevator pitch, and it's supposed to tie the big picture with the personal one. He says some of this I'm kind of quoting, and he said it should focus on who has the most to lose in the story and what do they want to win. So it really, helps me to focus and harness those ideas better. And then I also, and he recommends going to, New York Times bestsellers list, go to Amazon and start reading other people's hooks and compare it with your own. And so this is something I am constantly revising and going back to. So I love this method. It really helps you to clarify what your story is even about. Okay, next one, please.
Yeah. I want to explain the elevator pitch, what that term means for people who
Yeah.
haven't heard it before. So elevator pitch is the idea is if you had, I guess, some editor, or I think it quite possibly comes from the movie industry. So maybe it's a producer, and you got them in the elevator, and you can give them your idea, but you don't have very much time. So the elevator pitch is like a really, really short presentation to try to catch their attention while you have them trapped in the elevator.
Yeah,
I want to throw out
exactly.
that I may have it a little bit off, but I believe that's basically what it is, and it's a term that has been pretty popular for the last 10, 15 years. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, yeah, I would say that's exactly what I've heard as well. So you have someone for a few seconds, and in general, people are like, "Oh, you're an author. What's your book about?" And you have about 10 seconds or less to tell them exactly what your book is about. They don't have time to sit there all day, and they won't. So it's something a quick one word thing, but enough that interests somebody. And then, so the next thing you snowflake out, and I love it, it's kind of like a fractal in math, and it branches out, is you expand into a paragraph. And he says 5 total sentences. You have the story set up, that's the natural world of the plot clock. 3 disasters, the first disaster being your inciting incident. So this is how they go hand in hand. So he said 3 disasters and an ending. And so I return to the plot clock with that, and I plan out where are my disasters going to go. And generally, you have the inciting incident in the first act. In the second act, something should happen to lead to a low point. Every movie, every plot, the character is in the middle in the worst situation possible. So act 2 leads to that.
And
Then the third
that's
is,
from Save the Cat. The idea that
yeah,
you
well,
must have the low point followed by a rebound from it.
and exactly, and I've done
Yep.
Save the Cat as well, and I'm very familiar, and that's very structured. This is not quite as structured as that. But and then in Act 3, you have another disaster leading to a turning point between Acts 3 and 4, the oh my God moment that leads to your climax. And that is the 5, the ending is what he calls it. So that perfectly aligns with the plot clock. I spend about a week just thinking about what are those 5 things. And sometimes as I'm writing, they completely change. But so the plot clock helps me kind of keep in line, but the snowflake method really helps you to develop and flesh out your story. And so you have to write a compelling synopsis paragraph. And then he says, this is not the back jacket blurb, which I'm also looking at. The back jacket blurb is the first quarter of your story. That's Act One. Whereas this paragraph of 5 sentences is your entire book, including the ending. This is something you would pitch to an agent when you submit your book.
So are these 5 sentences, are they each one snowflake? Is that how it
Yeah,
works?
so yeah, so you went from one sentence now to a paragraph. A paragraph then goes to a page and it just branches out. Then you start developing arcs for your characters. And so he calls it 10 steps. And I don't necessarily do everything exactly perfectly. I kind of work between the two. Right. So then I go into Act Two. So my character, something major happened, they shake up their world. They made some decision and they're going in a direction. They're binding to a new world. And then in the second act, I think it's really interesting. Your character should do what they think to solve the problem, but everything they try to do fails. And the antagonist is a presence that is getting stronger. And so Act Two should end with like a low point, like the worst thing that could happen to them, something that you don't know how they're going to get out of. So that's
This
Act
how would
Two.
you adjust this if you don't have an antagonist? Like if the opposition is nature or society or something like that instead of another person,
Right. Well, it
change
could
it a
be
lot.
anything. It could still, but whatever happens, an explosion, a war, something societal, something, and it could be, not necessarily action filled, but something devastates your character or puts them in a place where it's going to be very hard to climb out. But then, no matter what happens to them to bring them to this low point, something causes a change. Something internal or external causes them to reframe or change their strategy. And then Act Three is supposed to be they get stronger because of this change, but their opposing force, whether it's a person, nature, society, whatever, for some reason also gets stronger. And so they're racing to this climax, and then when before they get to the ending, something major changes again. They call it a turning point that kind of like flips the story on its ear and leads to an explosive climax of some sort.
Yeah.
Okay, so right, I really go back and forth, and so I kind of feel like the snowflake method helps me really flesh out my story. And you go from a page now of summarizing your story in like 5 paragraphs, and really helps you to be concise into really fleshing out your characters. And then you have to plot each character's arc as well using this similar method. So right, it's snowflakes, it's exponential, to use a math term. And so I call it a very fluid process. And so right, I often when I'm writing, I learn things from my characters and I go back. Sometimes I throw everything away and I start over with my 5 sentences. And this goes back and forth. But I just feel like, some people want to write a very character-driven story. Others want to write a very plot-driven story. And I like plot-driven, but there's nothing worse than the great plot with flat, boring characters, right? With some mysterious dark past that you don't know what it is, but they have tantrums. So I want to actually create, 3-dimensional characters in a very exciting story. And so I want my plot to drive my characters, but also the characters, who they are, drives the plot. And so if we can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'm a very character driven author, and that
Okay.
I have to have the characters have to be interesting, and whenever I have a plot point, if the characters don't excite me, I can't write it. So I have to figure out how to make these people compelling on their own and how to have character moments. So I think here you and I are a little bit different. I think I agree with you that you have to have both.
Right.
Definitely. I'm a little bit less concerned with tightness of plotting than you are, and more concerned with the characters scenes being very, very exciting and entertaining.
Yes, and I mean, I strive for both, I guess. I just,
Yeah.
I guess the ideas that I have for whatever people call my ideas Twilight Zoney, which I take as a huge compliment.
Mhm.
And, I just think of, very like action-packed type things, but I also like meaningful interactions between characters. And every character should be interesting, like you said, on their own. Otherwise, they do not belong in the story at all, you know.
Mhm.
So, and it's hard, also to balance characters when you have a plot like mine that involves a lot of characters. They can't all be super important, and some are less detailed than others because you can't focus on all of them. So that's also challenging when you have a plot that requires a lot of characters and you don't want to confuse your reader, you know. So anyway, so this slide is basically all I said, just to really I always am revising and eliminating and changing things around, but also expanding and getting to know my characters. And another thing that I do, and I think I have this on the next slide, I read one time is, yeah, I get to know my characters by writing scenes. Like take your character and make them go to the bank. How is your character going to act? Or take your character, make them go grocery shopping, just like an average act, and write your character in that scene, even if they're a monster, whatever they are. And so I just try to think of scenes, and some I keep and some I don't. But it helps me to get to know my characters better, which sometimes informs my plot. So, like I said, very symbiotic, because sometimes I'm like, okay, this character I'm imagining wouldn't do this thing I imagined for the plot. I need to make a different plot or change my character. They don't go together. So, I'm constantly kind of thinking of both. And sometimes like I said, I scrap everything and start over because I'm not feeling good about the path I'm going down. Has that happened to you as well, where you're like, I don't like where this is going?
No, sure, absolutely. I think it happens to everybody. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you one related question. Uh, do you when you talk about reworking, are you talking about after the first draft or before the first draft?
Oh, both. God, I've written so many drafts. I've changed so many things. And I've also on each draft gotten feedback because I have participated in critique groups, gotten beta readers and things. So I had a major subplot of my book and I got such harsh reaction to it, like which surprised me. It involved a death of a child and then it turned into a coma of the child. And people just did not like that plot. I finally took it out of the whole story, which changed the entire book. And then I added a whole other subplot, but it really just radically changed the book. So I kind of went back to the drawing board between revisions 2 and 3 and just started over and like, what do I really need to keep this story alive? And what can I get rid of? What doesn't matter? And so, yeah, it's a constant reworking. And, each revision, you learn more about your story and where it should go.
Okay, so I have to be conscious of the time.
Great.
So because I have limited time in this version of Zoom, so let's cover the remaining slides and
Great.
move forward. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry about
Oh,
that.
oh yeah.
I'm on the short version of Zoom right now.
Oh yeah, no, that's okay. No, one thing, like I said, I'm always working backward and forward, and it helps me to plot things correctly, make sure things happen, and at the same time, but also I also have to make readers care about the characters at all times. So, okay. And so I would like to write the ending also and have it in mind so I know where I'm headed. Okay, next slide. So, I am a plotter and a pantser. I write outlines and sometimes I don't stick to them because my characters want to go in a different direction. And so, like I said, I'm not married to anything till the story is published. So you got to have an open mind. And if you hear a lot of critique about something of your story, listen to it. People will be honest with you about their opinion. And it's good to be in critique groups and get other people looking at your work. And they'll point out things you haven't even thought of. So. Okay, so last few slides. Okay, So, with these methods, I've written a lot, but another thing I can highly recommend that really helped me as a writer is I participated in this website, writingforums.org, and they used to have weekly contests. Now they're monthly. They give you a very simple topic and you can write anything you want. And I wrote over 30 short stories just doing these contests. And it really helped me to like master the basics of writing a story before I attempted a novel. So I find that all of this was very, very helpful for me.
Okay. Well, Jennifer, this has been a real pleasure, and I think I want to invite you back maybe with your next book so we can I want to talk about these what you're talking about being in critique groups and so on, because that is that's a I think a topic on its own where you and I actually might disagree, which would make it more interesting. We'll go back and forth with opinions on that one, and let's do that to promote your next book when it comes out later this year, is it?
We will see, hopefully this year.
One of them is coming out pretty soon, and
Yes.
the one is not too far away. So
yeah, hopefully this year and then early next year I'll have 2 books out. Fingers crossed.
okay,
So, well,
great.
thank you so much. I appreciate
I'm
it.
sorry to cut off just because of the recording, but
It's okay.
so again, for Jennifer, see all of her links and everything are going to be in the description for the video. And I hope that you're going to join me in checking out her book, which looks like action-packed. And I've written a lot about teenagers too, so I'm with you on that one. I also teach them. So
Wonderful.
yeah. So great, Jennifer, let's have you back. And thank you so much for being here to tell us about 2 plotting methods, 2 in 1. That was a powerful punch. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
The School of Fiction.